Hey, good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday. It's Tuesday. um, I wanted to pop on here this morning and talk about something that I kind of been thinking about for a little while. In just the whole inner healing and freedom ministry. How does trauma, like, does a traumatic event have to become trauma in our lives? And it's something I've really kind of been thinking about for a while. And the short answer is no, it doesn't have to become trauma. And so the question is, how does that happen? If we have a traumatic event, how does it end up becoming trauma? And what I have learned and I have found to be true in most situations are kind of a mixture of one or two things, either one or the other or both. But number one, it is support. And number two, it's how you internalize things, which to me still comes back to the support you have or don't have when a traumatic event happens. So, what does that look like? Let's kind of back it up and let's talk about even in childhood. Um, there's something traumatic can happen. It can be a chronic thing, it can be an acute thing, it's something that happens really soon, really suddenly. And what makes that traumatic event become trauma in the child's life, and I believe this is true even as adults, is the lack of support that we have. Um, because this is where the enemy gets us in those dark areas, in those dark places in our mind, when we don't have anyone to help filter out what's true and what's not true, to support us emotionally, to support us physically, to support us spiritually. And those are the ways I believe that trauma gets in. And so then you internalize them in a way that, whatever age you are, the maturity you have at that point, the experiences you have, the teachings you have from other people, that's how you start to figure out how to cope with those things. So if something happens at a very young age, let's say 4 or 5 years old, your experience with seeing things modeled is the only reference you're going to have for how to deal with something that comes up that may be traumatic or even just hurtful or wounding. It doesn't even have to be. When we think of traumatic events, we often think of something really big and huge. And those are the things that create wounds. But oftentimes it's those little things that kind of creep in that can create that trauma response in us. And so let's say something happens at 4 or 5 years old. You hear your parents screaming and fighting, and it's very scary for you. Well, if you don't have someone like a parent that can come in and sit with you and talk about how scary that was for you, hug you, love on you, explain how everything is going to be okay and how you're going to be safe, then that child sits in there with all the thoughts and understandings of that they have at that 4 and 5 years old, which is very, very little. And then let's add in the factor of the enemy, who loves to whisper lies to us, and so we start picking up those lies. I'm not safe. When mommy and daddy get into an argument, or mommy's not safe or daddy's not safe when they get into an argument, or when they yell. Maybe it's my fault, like maybe I'm the reason that they're fighting. There's just so many things that can happen with children, when they don't have that support and how to navigate those big feelings that they're having at the time. So these are the things that can start the trauma. So that one, let's say that's 4 and 5 years old, that's the seed that was planted at that age. And then it happens again, and it happens again, and it happens again, and it happens again, and there's no one there to help that child regulate their emotions, learn what to do with them, what's healthy. Then they start to develop these unhealthy beliefs and unhealthy patterns and habits in how to deal with these big emotions. And there's where trauma sets in. And so, even with, let's say, a car accident, if you are in a car accident at a young age or at any age, honestly, and you don't have the support of someone to come alongside you and help you to unpack what you're feeling, um, then that what could have been a traumatic event can turn into actual trauma in our lives, which affect us from in you know from that time on, because we can develop all kinds of beliefs and coping mechanisms and that sort of thing. And so I really believe that it's not about protecting our kids. And I'm talking about kids because a lot of the work that I do with people takes us back into childhood and dealing with where those seeds were planted. You can have trauma at any point in your life, especially if you were never really taught and never really learned how to regulate your emotions, how to deal with big emotions, how to deal with conflict or trauma when it happens. Then yes, trauma can stick with you even when you're an adult. And so, for example, just a little part of my testimony is in 2019, I went through breast cancer. And that could be a really traumatic event. And it was a traumatic event for me going through treatments, not knowing what treatments I was going to need, what my diagnosis was going to end up being. That could have been something that really stuck with me for a really long time. Hi, Rose. I'm glad you're on. Could have been something that stuck with me and I could still be dealing with it on a very, very difficult level. And I remember when I was diagnosed, and there were people around me that had been through cancer before, and in just talking to people. And one of the things that was really common is, oh my gosh, you'll be in fear for the rest of your life when the cancer or if the cancer is going to come back. And I thought, my gosh, that's terrible. I don't want to have to deal with that. But what I figured out is it's not necessarily that, yeah, I mean, there's always that possibility. Of course, there's always the possibility. But I think it really comes down to more of not having the proper support that's needed. And I say that because I did. Number one, I'd had a word from the Lord who said he was going to heal me. I think faith is a huge piece of part of the regulating the emotions. Excuse me. I think it's a huge piece of having that support, because when you have faith, if you have the Lord, if you know who you are in him, then you can walk through fires so much easier. Not that you don't get singed a little bit, not that you can't get burned, but that those things heal a lot more quickly. So I do feel like faith is a key component, but then also physical support from people around you. And I had that. I had emotional support. My husband was very supportive. My son was very supportive. My family was very supportive. I had friends who would check in on me and just see how I'm doing. Sorry. I should have had some water over here, but I didn't. I'm going to take you with me. And so, what could have been a really traumatic event for me ended up being, um, you know, easier to get by because I had the proper support emotionally and physically. And so, I think it's really important to remember, and especially with children, again, going back to children, because I feel like a lot of this really starts in childhood, is if you have children, look up helping kids on regulating big emotions and how to help them navigate those big emotions if you don't already know how to do that. I did not know how to do any of that. A lot of times we take our parenting styles and our ideas from how we were parented, and that's just how it was always done. But I would really challenge you to think differently on that. because just because it was tradition, just because it was done in the past doesn't make it good and healthy. And there's been so much development in child development and how to, um, you know, just around emotional and mental health, learning those things. If you plan to become a parent or you have your parent of small children, look those things up. Look up regulating, helping your children regulate their emotions. Because what that's doing is that's teaching them when those big things come up, it's training them on how to deal with them so they don't end up with trauma. So that traumatic event can become trauma if you don't help them navigate it. And so um, I just really want to talk about that this morning because that was something I wished I had known a long time ago. And I think in some ways, the Holy Spirit taught me on some things, but I definitely could have done a whole lot better. So, whether you have children in your life or it's adults, um, getting that support is crucial when you go through a traumatic event. Now, a lot of us have developed coping mechanisms where we don't tell anybody when we are struggling. We just kind of suck it up, buttercup. And if you come from my generation or some of the older generations, it's you just you just keep on going. You plow through. You figure it out. You pull yourself up by your bootstraps, is what I've heard. Actually, heard my mom say that before. And so you're taught not to support on to support to get support from people, but or ask for that help. But it's really important that you do if you find yourself in this place, because not it's great, and I would love to say that everyone is has the awareness to come and check on you, but they don't. And then if you had parents that were not good at that, then your parents are not going to be the people who are going to come in and support you too. And I like to say, my friend always says, you teach people how to treat you and how to love you well. And so I think this is part of our of helping people to love you well, is to let them know when you need the support and tell them what that support looks like. Just don't leave that up to chance, because what looks like support to me may not look like support to you. And that was one of the things that my husband and I had to really talk about, is what that support looks like. And it may be different for the situation. But traumatic events and hurts and wounds don't have to become trauma. And so as you start to deal with those seeds and where those seeds were planted, and you figure out what the lies were that you were believing, or any of the inner vows that you made to, during those traumatic and those hurtful and woundful times, especially early in childhood, will help you to unlock how to not allow traumatic events to become trauma even in your adulthood. And so I just want to talk about that this morning. I don't know if anyone has any questions. I'm so glad some people are on here. So if you have questions, just let me know. But yeah, so support and how you internalize things are two of the main keys when working through the inner healing stuff and figuring out where your roots are to things. So I hope that helps this morning. And I may have, actually, I think I'm going to share a little scene from later. I'm going to put it on my Facebook. And it's a funny way. It's funny on how, but it's still support. It's from Steel Magnolias. I saw someone post it this morning, and it was reminded me of this concept. And it's the scene where Shelby, if you've seen the movie, Shelby passed away. I forgot her character's name, but it's oh goodness, I can't remember. I'm drawing a complete blank on the actress even. But her daughter dies, and they'd just gone through the funeral, and she was so upset, and she was mad, and she's just like, I'm just so angry. I want to hit something. And, and Olivia Dukakis pulls out, she's here, hit this, hit Weezer. And so they're supporting her in that moment. And then they all end up laughing. And of course, Weezer stomps off because she's hurt. But that it's a funny way of showing support, but it really is. It's like you're in your big emotion. You're, she was not able to navigate her feelings well. And her friends came in, they were there for her to support her. And that event with her daughter, with burying her daughter, could have been a long lasting trauma. And of course, we haven't, the movie kind of ends not too long after that. Um, there's a little more after that, but it could have ended with her having lifelong trauma from what happened. But I believe that with the support of her friends that way, it was able to become a traumatic event without lasting trauma. And so I'm going to post that video later because I thought it was such a great picture um, of what I'm talking about this morning. So, okay, I think that's it. I hope you have a great day. If you have questions, comments, put them in the comment section. We love to hear, um, if how people have supported you, or if you want to share what support looks like to you. I would love to hear your thoughts. And yeah, and even if you want to share a little testimony, even about how someone has come alongside you during something and how it helped you to not um, end up with lasting trauma in your life. So, okay, have a beautiful, blessed morning, and I will see you again soon. Okay, bye.